Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started. I appreciate everybody being here. Um, I will go ahead and, um, yeah, we're good. Okay, so I will be monitoring the live chat. So feel free to, of course, ask any questions at any time. Again, I'm Dr. Charles Russo, and this is, just my Substack, and I got to say, my brand is really all about critical thinking. And so, critical thinking in just our daily life, whether you just want to be that business person, that mom, that dad, the grandfather, um, even if we have teenagers or young adults here, I always believe that individuals in our society today, for lots of reasons, and we'll kind of touch on a lot of that here in the next 45 minutes to an hour. We really do see quite a number of individuals in society that are not necessarily, well, thinking critically about information they're receiving and information they're imparting. And when I say information, I really do mean that very loosely. I'm not talking about information in terms of actual knowledge, but that's why I say critical thinking in the abstract sense. Um, over the last year, I've really poured myself into the Substack, where I write every day. I research. While I am a teacher, I am by trade an intelligence analyst. So everything about reading and comprehension and then writing. If we're not writing, we're not actually having the foundation of our thinking happening. And this is an issue within our own society. I mean, we're gonna, you have to be talking about, if you've never heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect, we'll even talk about that. But in my two publications, the first was, of course, the Precision and Perspective, and this book really was the catalyst of when I was teaching at the graduate and even the doctoral level. I started seeing where students weren't applying critical thinking. And a lot of my students are criminal justice. They're either crime analysts, they're intelligence analysts. They work for either, a state, local municipality, but then you also get into the national security level individuals. So the second book, which is the Safeguarding Analytical Integrity, I wanted to be able to do two things. One, show how analytical integrity has diminished in our society, but it just isn't something over like the last 10 years or 5 years. No, it actually goes back to, you can go back to the 1960s, where I go back about 50 some years to the Gulf of Tonkin, and it transcends, yes, political party. So it's not just a Republican versus Democrat or Democrat versus Republican issue. It is a political ideological issue. And so that even makes it more broad in the sense that it's not just Democratic ideology, Republican, you're Federalist. You also have to bring in socialism, communism as well. And those are the things that really have been brought up and into our intelligence. So even when you're in a crime analyst and you're looking at patterns for crime and where for concentrations of patrols, or to explain who or what could be doing this type of crime. If political ideology, and political, you can go beyond, or sorry, you can narrow it down and be really talking more about um, the political ideology in an office, and it doesn't have anything to do with Democrat, Republican, communism, socialism, if you will. It's the political uh, ideology in an office that, well, it would be bad optics if we reported this, or it would be bad optics if we reported that, so on and so forth. So I really love to be able to hone in, yes, as I say here, precision, assumptions, bias, analytic discipline, which we can use in our daily life, in our jobs, and even within our own research as, say, scholars and academics. It's also about intellectual humility. And and we're going to talk a little bit more about that here in a moment. But then how to think clearly in really this noisy information environment. We are bombarded each and every single day with how are we supposed to act upon information that is, well, either fabricated, misleading, no substance, no context. So, really looking at this from a lens of, you need to be the one to do the critical thinking. So, just a disclaimer here. While I am talking, I am not representing any institution, whether it is government or a association, as well as higher education institution. This really is something very personal to me. Um, and that's where we're going to go. Like I said, I will be monitoring the live chat throughout this next 45 minutes, or even almost an hour from now. So, why are we having this conversation? This is a big one for a lot of people. Why are we having this conversation? A lot of people, want to know why. What is going on? Why do you see a lot more people writing about critical thinking? Well, or even teaching critical thinking. And to me, within the intelligence community, U.S. intelligence community, when I hear people say that they are talking and teaching critical thinking, it doesn't go far enough. We are not teaching the critical thinking or holding students and practitioners, professionals to the level of what is really deep thinking. So, thinking is not the default setting of us. We do not have that operational condition. Um, and most institutions don't design curriculum to be just that, to have more of an operational condition. So we have to really think about protecting what is critical thinking. We have to cultivate it. It's not an inherent trait. It is a habit, just like anything. You have to exercise that habit day in and day out. If you're not doing yourself, and this is where intellectual humility, intellectual people think of intellectualism as, here I have my photo that you're, well dressed and, with the scotch in hand, and you're able to philosophize. While that is a great image of somebody that could call themselves an intellectual, it really is anyone that has this appetite to learn, to educate themselves, to really, again, you want to be the quietest person in the room, because usually that quietest person in the room, the one that does not talk, does not need to hear themselves. They are listening, they are taking in information, And they don't have to impart information to be the intellectual. They can use, and often do, take information from what others say and ingest it. They process it. They're able to go back and really look at the information and do for themselves what others should be doing, which is researching it, making sure, is this really true? Is this an empirical fact? Is this a truth? And we can get into, and I do talk about the differences between truth and fact. Um, just because something might be a truth does not necessarily make it a fact, and vice versa. Matter of fact, truth is really subjective. A fact is empirical. It means that you can trace it scientifically to an actual conclusion. So within my own work, I try to keep returning to the same problem. And that really is that environments often reward the simulation of thought, not its substance. This is true in academia. We try, I know, I talk to many colleagues, and I'm not calling colleagues out for it unless you really truly know, am I really reading the psychology, the philosophy of critical thought? It is the community of inquiry. It is how we have to look at information. And what are we doing with that information? We don't have to action information that we have. That doesn't prove that you are an intellectual, that if you can impart this information, it really is the intellectual, again, has the insatiable appetite to be reading anything they can, whether it's poetry, and it should be kind of all of it together, because it provides you a perspective on life. We all come from different lived experiences, but what does critical thinking actually do? To look at what David Moore, Professor Moore, who passed away about 2 years ago, he was a Defense Intelligence College adjunct and Air Force colonel, I believe. And he had actually written about critical thinking for intelligence analysts. And one of his, and it always has stuck with me about critical thinking. So when someone asks, what's the definition of critical thinking? We can talk about critical thinking in a definition from Webster's Merriam Dictionary all day long. But what he pretty much focused it into was critical thinking is thinking about your thinking while thinking. I know it sounds pretty interesting, and you can almost chuckle at it, and a bit of a cliche to it. But really, if you thinking about thinking while you're thinking, thank you very much, uh, Mr. Jimenez, or Dr. Jimenez. Sorry, thank you. Um, and there is something to be said about when you are thinking and you're going, here's a problem. What is the problem? Is it really a problem? We know as academics, as scholars, as practitioners, and as professionals, when we have to ask that first and foremost, what is the problem? Um, that when you look at a problem, are you really looking at the premise of the problem? Are you breaking it down into logic? Because if we're not breaking down even the simple, what we say is a simple argument, words have consequences. We have to look at the precision of our wording, our tone, the manner in which we're framing what is an argument. Do we have the support of what we are saying is an argument? But then you have to look at, like any well-defined, say, introduction to any analytical product. Again, I bring up that it's scholarly, academic, practitioner, and professional, that when you have, yes, a statement for the problem, then you go on to a position or the argument. Well, then there's, well, what is the position? Is that your position? Is that supported through other means? And then we get into the purpose. What are we really wanting to have the argument and the position framed? Why are we framing it that way? What is the purpose in the end that we're going to reach a conclusion? And what should that conclusion ultimately tell your audience? Precision in this case really matters. And when I say precision without humility, um, and then I'll go on to integrity becomes brittle, performative, or ideological. A lot of us perform without humility, meaning that you have to be right. And you've ever had that where you are talking with someone, and rather than saying that they're open to suggestion, they are open to information. They don't have to debate it with you or argue with you. And I really don't like the word argue, because to me that the argument phrase is that you're already adversaries, and you need to come into, and this is part of being an intellectual, is that again you're taking in information, take in somebody else's perspective. They have a different lived experience, um, and so having the humility to know that, hey, I don't know enough about this. I don't have all the facts. Can you show me the facts? Can you point me in the right direction? Having, again, asking more questions in a non adversarial tone is not wrong. That to me is the big part of integrity, that you have the ability to say, not only in a humility way, having the humility to say, I don't know enough about this subject. It's interesting. And I guess I need to learn more. It's also having that integrity to say, I don't know. Let me get back to you. I remember, in the military, as well as being an intelligence professional, we all are told, when briefing or when talking to somebody, if you don't actually know something, don't try to ad hoc your way out of it. It is really what you need to be doing is saying you have the humility and the integrity to know when you just don't know something, and to stop yourself and say, I don't know. Let me go research that and I'll get back to you. These are how really good conversations and discussions are brought about. Because again, your reputation, your position becomes very brittle, if you are not one that really wants to impart information, or even just be that sponge. Because then you become that performative individual. We call it, the tap dance. You're trying to tap dance around. Yes, and in the discussion, Kate, thank you. You say, I always tell my supervisors who are working towards becoming licensed therapists to always come from a place of curiosity rather than judgment. Yes. See, that's that judgment and the great word. Thank you. Curiosity. It is, like I said, when we look at being an intellectual and trying to improve our own critical thinking, and if you can impart a critical thinking experience to someone else, if they say, how did you know that, you can say, I thought about it, I went and researched it. And to have that curiosity, I call it the community of inquiry. We are, as human beings, should be curious. We should be asking more questions than judging, rather than saying, I know more than you do, so therefore, well, I never like words of just that name calling, because it is judgmental. Say, oh, that guy's, they don't just, they're a charlatan, if that's the easiest way that we want to say something. To be able to call somebody that is, to me, belittling of yourself. That shows very little critical thought on your end, because we don't know where somebody else is coming from. We don't know what kind of day they've had. We all have the days that we haven't had enough caffeine, or we didn't eat, or we just woke up with some really bad news and it put us on a track for that day. Well, we're looking at that day very differently. And that's where I think the Stoics come in to play, on looking at how we can face our challenges and improve ourselves. So while I've talked for, several minutes on this, I really do want us to step back and ask this larger question. What is critical thinking before it's applied anywhere at all? What is critical thinking? Yes, and thinking that everyone is an expert on their own lives. Yes, because I can't tell you about your life and your perspective. But what we can offer one another as intellectuals, as equals. See, this is where I really do believe everyone is equal, regardless of status in life, regardless of our credentials, regardless of any education. Because you can say, well, somebody's uneducated. Well, do you mean just because they don't have, a two-letter, BA, MA, or a JD, or even the three-letter DBA, PhD at the end of your name? No, you can be highly educated, and yet you are that quintessential intellectual, because I've met plenty of people who have never went to college and yet are some of the smartest people in the room. And I would love to be in the room with them to be able to have conversations. So again, I look at, you know, here are a lot of my readings and writings. Um, yes, the putting it out there for you all to see. Here currently in 2026, I am getting ready to publish Precision and Curiosity. Thank you for both Kate and David for talking about curiosity. It is actually a theoretical framework that I've been working on, gosh, for about 7 or 8 years, during which time, during the early part of, my 7 or 8 years, I was working on my dissertation through and my PhD, and was looking at philosophy and the framework in which we are framing our as intelligence analysts, as academics. We're looking at precision because we're judging and we're grading students' papers and their own thought processes. But when we are doing that, where's our own curiosity? That are these individuals showing us a curiosity, but also showing that they have precision in their critical thinking by exploiting that curiosity. So when we look at any kind of philosophy, yes, I believe that, and especially this day and age with AI, that are we really looking down the barrel of a gun that individuals could become smarter due to the fact that they are allowing AI to augment, not replace, critical thinking? That to me, that is my whole want in life. That is the reason that I really have started to look at critical thinking, especially in the last year. I have really poured myself more into critical thought and wanting to understand how what I don't know. See, this is that lived experience. Like, I have my own lived experience in which I have to look at what I don't know. And therefore, I write because that helps me solidify the foundations of my own critical thinking. I read and I read, um, and it's just I can't read enough or long enough, and because I still have to write, but I've augmented a lot of my own research by utilizing AI tools and techniques to help me better understand some of the vagueness in my own research. So that's why I say, why start in the abstract? Because if we don't start in the abstract, we just get down to the foundations. Well, I think that you are missing your own thought patterns, meaning you can identify gaps, um, inconsistencies, incorrect thought. And then you're able to turn it around and really be able to no longer have it distorted, right? So before thinking is applied to, and I said, I kind of run the gamut here: politics, intelligence, education, artificial intelligence. It has to be understood as a way of relating to truth. You heard me talk earlier about truth, not fact. I'm saying relating to truth. So when we look at definitions before slogans, how many times do we see this in social media? It's how they grab your attention. And there's whole classes, webinars. You can pay people tens of thousands of dollars to be part of their group, that they're going to help you get more followers, that you can monetize. Well, they really look at more of the slogans. So if we can't define the thing, we're just going to perform it. You're going to imitate it. You become that. And I've had it too: imposter syndrome, right? That, well, I'm going to fake it till I make it. I've met many a colleagues, both as practitioners, professionals, um, that have. And I've really had to ask myself, what is it that they're missing? They might be very good at a specific part of their job, but are they truly, and I'm not judging, I am trying to figure out what is it that they're missing, and in order for me to possibly help them, I need to be able to figure that out. So I go back to the definitions of things, and I've had these conversations. I actually had a conversation with a student who asked the an interesting question of, well, after I had published an article, they commented outside of Substack and outside of the classroom to me and said, well, we need to define critical thinking. And that's what led me to, wait, um, have you looked up what is critical thinking? And we can look that up. We can ask AI, give me the definition of critical thinking. But what and they truly were not. I had to ask, are you being sarcastic and facetious, or are you truly like want to have a discussion about critical thinking, the definition, and then how do we apply it? They said all of the above, because no one, until they started reading, because I was pushing out my articles. A lot of it, they said, went right over the head. They have no clue what a lot of the terminology is used. They had to go look up fallacies. They had to go look up Bayesian uh, bias. They didn't understand the different categories of critical thinking and even the mechanics. Um, you're right. It is difficult for many to define, but it's because we haven't taken the time to really truly want to know what is it that we need to know about critical thinking. How do we make ourselves think deeper, think smarter, and think stronger? Yes, asking a lot of questions, soaking up information. I think that's the abstract question that slows us down and asks what loyal thinking owes to reality itself. So that's why I say judgment before ideology. Now, you heard me say earlier, I don't like the word judgment, but here I'm looking at judgment as a term of being able to impart for yourself what is and is not part of a question that is being honest. Like I said, I go back to this individual who asked a question that I had to think at first with reading it, that this individual is being sarcastic. And that, okay, yeah, we need to define critical thinking. There's a definition out there, and I talk about it in almost every single article, because I think that a lot of times I build on articles. Again, it's due to the fact that as I'm reading and researching, or I come up against an individual or group, because I even just published the article on in-group orthodoxy, which explains a lot about inter-office politics, if you will, as well as, say, organizational. Um, and that's it. It's not the same as group think. That's different as part of a critical thinking, but really understanding our own assumptions, our own bias. Really, do we have the articulation of words that will mean something profound to us? So that's why I say we have to be questioning things in the abstract rather than just saying, what's this word? What's the definition? How do I apply it? Why am I going to apply it this way? Yes, habits before techniques. We have to have tools, whether it's a dictionary, it's the internet, but tools without any kind of disposition really becomes just empty rituals, professional theater. And that's why I say I bring up about having individuals who have that imposter uh, syndrome. There's individuals that we've met throughout our careers that you could honestly say, well, they did try to fake it, and they just tried to explain things, and we've just watched them derail the train. You know that you couldn't take your eyes off it, but did we have the humility to try to get them back on track and save them from themselves? So the question is not only how do we use critical thinking, but what kind of mind must I become to think honestly at all? And again, I think that comes down to our own intellectual humility. If we're without the humility to say what we know and what we don't know, well, you're not being honest with yourself, and you definitely are not being honest with those around you. Critical thinking is a disciplined attention directed towards reality, clarifying claims, testing assumptions, evaluating evidence, uh, and comparing alternatives and forming honest judgment under certainty. That is the definition of critical thinking. Remember earlier we were talking about it and says, yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult for some people, but if you almost like you memorize it, but it's also looking at what, when I say words have consequences, choosing your words wisely in trying to frame a concise idea, and you never want to use the buzzwords. I think that when we say critical thinking, when I look at even for proposals for conferences, I look at curriculums for other universities and institutions. Anything that says we're going to teach critical thinking, it it really is just a quick, well, we're going to look at assumptions, and we're going to look at structured analytical techniques. Well, but are you looking at having a set of structure in disciplining an individual? Do you have micro protocols that people can fall back onto? Now, within both of my first publications, I do. I put in there how, like, whether it was through ICD 203, 206, and 208 for analytical integrity, do we really look at directing our attention on reality? Not saying, well, this is my thought. Words that I say get out of your system is opinion and beliefs. Why? Well, they're words that have oh emotion behind them. They're very emotional words. And so if someone says, well, I believe, well, belief, that's their own lived experience. And while you don't necessarily need to go down the road of a debate with that, because again, their only support there is what they believe. It's what they have cherry picked, confirmation biased, and evaluated without evidence necessarily. But if you say, well, here's my perspective based on, I've tested these assumptions by doing certain amount of research. You have to be able to clarify your claim. This is where I said again, clarifying is that words have consequences. How do we evaluate evidence as both professionals and practitioners, meaning academic scholars and intelligence professionals? Well, we have to take information that we look through all sources, right? We want to look for pros and cons, contrarian viewpoints. We want to be able to use, yes, structured analytical techniques the right way and the complete way. And then in the end, what does that evidence really tell us? Are we doing it in a qualitative manner or a quantitative manner? I trust more of the quantitative if we can index it and codify it into numerical values and be able to have the certainty, right? Uncertainty or certainty of saying it's possible, probable, right? Then what kind of alternatives are we really looking at? So when we go from that clarifying what's being claimed, we now have to test those assumptions. What are the assumptions? Are we listing all those assumptions? Are we using outside sources to come up with other assumptions? You have to be aware of your own, let alone you have to be looking at what are the ones that we don't see. Okay. This is all very imperative on you, the evaluator. So then you look at that evidence. What evidence is warranted? What ones are we going to discard? And why would we discard that evidence? Now we have to look at the comparison. What else could explain this, especially when we're looking at it, say, from a law enforcement standpoint or an intelligence standpoint? And we want to say, well, what other alternatives are there? Are there other comparisons that we can make? And then what, in the end, can I honestly conclude? With that conclusion, when we are making a conclusion paragraph, normally or a conclusion executive summary, it's wrapping up all the significant major points, a resummation of your thesis statement. Was your hypothesis was satisfied, or did it become null? And then really being able to say, so here are some implications. See, again, it's being that you have the humility, that you have the integrity as an analyst. An analyst, again, I can use that very broad, whether, yes, you are just sitting there listening to people talk about a problem. So I think somewhere someone said that they're a therapist. So whether I mean, you're an analyst, you're taking in information, and you, against all of the education, the knowledge that you have that you can fall back on, and you studied and how other people have looked at problems and overcome problems. Well, you have the implications. If you do this, this could be an outcome. If you don't do this, this could be an outcome. And then what about the recommendations? I think that goes a long way when we're looking at providing really a conclusion. Yes, we have to use the word judge here because in the end, we're trying to provide information to, say, a decision maker. And that decision maker could be an individual in counseling, or it could be a four-star, admiral general out there needing information. So, oh, thank you, Kate. Yeah, so having that background that you have, a psychotherapist, you have your group practice, and you are looking at, your other providers, your other therapists, that you have to be able to go through the same, like, if they are going to end up in the end helping someone and drawing a conclusion where they're going to have to kind of go through these, you can even put smart, uh, as one of the analytical techniques that we could look at in assuring that we evaluate and we analyze information. We could use the intelligence cycle, right? Anything that says, okay, we need to, how do we go back and really look at information when new information is identified or a new gap is identified, or evaluation of information comes to light that says I can't trust that information, or new information came in that I can trust. Now you also have to compare it, and ultimately, in quick order, you're coming back to a natural judgment, right? So what critical thinking is not: moving from performance to substance. Here's where I'm getting at. When we look at this matrix that I have, false substitutes, hot takes dressed up as an analysis. We How many people look at Instagram and Facebook, and you've got so many people that they go and they do hot takes on, they read through Reddit, and then they want to come out with information that says, X, Y, and Z. But in the end, they say it's now, well, we're looking at this and we're going to try to answer this problem. It's not analysis. Um, when we look at contrarian posture for its own sake, you heard me talk about, well, if you're going to have information and you're going to come to a conclusion by evaluating it yourself, coming up with alternatives, I don't want you just to take one piece of information and then try to flip it and say, here's the contrarian viewpoint. You want to do this in very much as, yeah, rage bait is one of them. You're trying to almost prove that you're right. And so this is where I really don't like the false substitutes to what critical thinking is. We never risk judgment. Oh my gosh, how many people, when you've asked them to come up with, well, what is it that's your conclusion? What's your answer? And they'll tap dance around it because they've wanted to try to say, well, I just don't want to make a judgment right now. Well, that means they really didn't think critically. They put on a performance. Um, and so even that verbal confidence, again, this is the individual, and I know I can sit here and talk all night. I'm a chatty Cathy when I talk about information like this. But when you are in a group setting or even with an individual, when we look at a verbal confidence as somebody who just keeps talking and talking and talking, they themselves think that, well, I have depth of information. Well, when you go, well, you really haven't talked about much, you know, tell us what you're really talking about by providing outside context, substance, research. And I'm not saying you're at a cocktail party and you're going to be asking for this, but you should be able to show that, okay, that individual is not really deep thinking. So when we look at, and we've met this kind of person, is information hoarding without any kind of synthesis. They're the ones that'll grab a stack of reports and say, see, I've got all of this. This all proves I'm right. Okay, well, synthesize it into a paragraph so we can, or a report so we can know all about it. And unfortunately, we do have those people. But what we want to in this discipline reality is that curiosity is governed by a method, a process that we can use as, analysts, as researchers, as scholars, as academics, as professionals. There has to be a method, right? So when we look at, say, research methods, well, we can say it's qualitative, quantitative, it's mixed methods, right? At least you can say my curiosity is going to be governed by the framework, the guide rails that is qualitative, quantitative, mixed methods, so on and so forth. But then you can also go down to the design. Well, I want to do a case study, or I want to do a quasi experimental, whether you're talking qualitative, quantitative, reasoning accountable to evidence. Again, you heard me really, I think for 45 minutes, I've probably talked about it, that we have to have evidence to be able to go, okay, just because it's in a book, does that satisfy that it's evidence? Kind of a trick question. So I'm going to lay that up. What do you think? Just because it's been written in a book, is that honestly evidence? Well, I'm going to tell you, it is, but it is not. Because if you're reading one book and you take it completely at its face value, you're doing yourself a disservice. You're reasoning, but are you holding that information accountable, that evidence accountable? Now, if I pick up another book from another author, from another researcher, from another time period, and it's saying close to the same thing or something different, it's still evidence to the contrary, but you're able to point to evidence. Okay. And the more evidence you build, this is why we try to teach our students, this is why we try to teach mentees about going and finding more evidence, more information. Just don't go at somebody with just a judgmental attitude because you feel that maybe it's, well, I didn't like that information, or I didn't like that they said, well, but did you find out the reasons why? And then uncertainty is stated honestly. I think that when we look at, and I've been talking to a lot of intelligence individuals, and one of the questions, and I had written another Substack article on it, is about understanding and knowing the terms of uncertainty. And you heard me talk about it a little bit earlier. Yeah, single source information is not intelligence. It's not verified. It's not vetted. You can't corroborate it. You have to have, multiple sources. This goes to whether it's intelligence or it's research. And you're talking about doctoral or even, master's level, graduate level. But when we're talking about uncertainty, can you actually really look at uncertainty in the terms that are honest? How much, and I've over my 30 plus year career in intelligence, there's plenty of times I've read assessments that say it's the probability of this happening in the next 90 days is significant, right? They put that term of uncertainty which is significant, but they've also placed the statistical uncertainty to it. Is that honest? Is it because, and I look back and go, there are times over my 30-year career without knowing, we don't teach it enough. We don't have it where we are even within doctoral studies, when they are writing dissertations, when they use terms of uncertainty within qualitative and sometimes qualitative as well. Are we asking them to be very honest because they want to have their research looked at or viewed in a certain way, so that uncertainty is then diminished, right? We know that we're human, and there's times that, well, we don't want to be wrong. So we would say, well, I'm 90% sure, I'm 100% sure. Well, are you? Are you being honest that, and this is for, significant others, because I'll do this too. You know, I am certain I paid that bill only to go do some research and find out, ooh, I didn't. It was late. Well, now I got to take back the certainty rather than saying, well, I'm uncertain. I might have. So there's a 50-50 chance I did. Well, that's the honesty. So then we have that judgment. It is earned rather than improvised. And judgment comes from being able to think critically about every element that we are looking at. We are not only just visualizing looking at, but the processes, the methods, the information, and then what we're trying to impart and how we're imparting it. I think this is where AI is not going to overcome and take analyst positions. It's never going to be a therapist, even though it might be able to give, I think, when if you were to ask it questions, it doesn't have that empathy. Um, it doesn't have, but at the same time, it doesn't have the ego either. So we're playing with that judgment, which is often improvised within, say, intelligence agencies, which is within just our human beings within our daily life. So self scrutiny as part of our analysis is something that I try to get each and every one of us to do day in and day out. Because if we're not doing it, well, then we only have ourselves to blame, because we have to look at, and I call it the hostile age of thought. There's really no other way to put it. That why the modern environment often produces the illusion of thinking, but we're really not thinking. I read tons of articles each day as part of, yeah, the Substack. There are a lot of great ideas and thought leaders out there, but then I also look at a lot of thought leaders and go, but you're really not. Why? Because you're only producing the illusion of thought. You're still pumping out stuff because I look at it as noise. It's thin. It doesn't really go very deep. It's the same stuff, only because, well, you're looking at the relevance of today. Um, we have to, and of course, our attention spans. When you doom scroll, you're on that page, and this is where TikTok has been wonderful. You can look at the analytics of how many people click on or just scroll past your say your video or your photo, and how long they linger there, um, because we too apply this as, well, that's information I don't really want to know, yet you didn't read it. um, Especially on Substack, I'll look for 1 to 2 hours throughout the day, the people that I follow, or people that within the categories that I look at, um, I want to read through all of their whole. I love that it tells me it's a 2-minute read, it's a 5-minute read, but premature closure gets a reward, and we take it as it being decisiveness. That, well, I just didn't like that because, well, it didn't go with what my narrative is. And that's why I say narrative pressure is next. When we look at group stories, well, that's what the algorithms are, right? Can we get ourselves out of those own algorithms? I really think that we need to. But can we employ AI to do this as well? Yes, you can. You very much can look at how getting yourself out of an algorithm, not only within social media, but setting up agentic AIs to give you information that you don't necessarily would be reading. Especially let's pick politics. That You may identify as a Democrat, but you want to look at what is it that the Republican side or conservative side, what is their narrative, and vice versa. You can, and you're not being bombarded. You're not looking at it as noise. And I do not like news, by the way, if I'm using the analogy. You know, there are better sources of information that you can get, but you have to look at it critically as well. But that's why I say group stories. I don't know. They feel truer than evidence. Well, yes, because they know what they're feeding. And if you tell a lie long enough and enough times, people will begin to believe it. When you look at our state of education, K through 12, how many kids, and when I say kids, I'm talking, the high school, they don't know some of the basic information. I mean, you look at, the individual on the street, that like on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook, where they ask basic questions. When was this country, uh, when did it become a country? When was the Declaration of Independence signed? When was it ratified? Some of them couldn't even tell you. Some of them couldn't even tell you, what continent are we on? Can you name two continents? Can you name two African countries? And they can't. Sometimes these are even 20, 25-year olds who can't. And so are we looking at institutional incentives? They're looking at rewarding alignment, not at accuracy. Can you take this test and can you pass it? Your rote memory. But then as soon as you're done memorizing it, we're off to the other side and we're doing something completely new. So it's no longer a system of really enjoying the education, the knowledge, and putting more substance to it. See, then we have the attention extraction. The distraction, which is social media, becomes the norm and the conditioning of our mind. I'm not an anti-social media person by all means, and I too get sucked in to some of this stuff. But I have to know and have to be able to tell myself, you know what? I'm not going to become distracted by going down a rabbit hole that Trump said this, or that the Senate Democrats said that. Yes, I can talk politics because that seems to be where we are distracted. News media will do that as well. They'll distract you with some other salacious scandal in order to get you away from something else, because we are conditioned as Americans. Now you look at what Europeans are doing as well, little less, but Americans are very, very fixated in studies to social media, and that's where they believe they get their hard facts and information that become their truths. So when we look at the dispositions of serious minds, I want you to look at it from this standpoint. And we did talk about a lot of this earlier, that, curiosity, ask what else may be true, but also what else is not true. Um, and that's the humility. We were losing that humility in that we should know what is not true, or at least have that curiosity to say, I don't know, maybe I should go back and look at this information. The conscientiousness does a lot of the cognitive work. When we start talking about cognitive abilities, capabilities, do individuals have the ability to talk? Yeah, halfway, a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth can get out, or its pants on. You're right, by Winston Churchill, because it just seems like that is the wildfire. So you have to look at, yeah, does the conscious mind, is it doing the cognitive work? Because there are people who have diminished cognitive capabilities. They just can't think for themselves. They have to be told. But what about the metacognitive? What about you and I, that we have the ability to understand, we have our cognitive abilities around us. We know that we are able to think, I can make up my own mind. I can do things that are safe. I know the difference between right and wrong. But what about metacognitive capabilities and skills? Just like I have my curiosity, but I'm not going to be fooled. I know what a scam is. I know what it looks like. How many of us have taken the information assurance, cybersecurity tests once a year for your companies, your institutions? And yet some people still can't pass it. And they've been taking these same things for 20, 25 years, even with the new types of scams that that email that came through is pretty much a scam. But we don't have that metacognitive ability of that curiosity to say, I'm going to go look. There are websites that will tell you if that's a scam or not. But we also don't have the humility. We're losing that humility to know certainty is not truth. That when someone says you need to answer this email right away, and that getting that you're going to get $1,000 or $1,000,000, yes, we still have people who click on those emails. So I want you to have, when we have that judgment, it's utilizing the conscious as well as your integrity, staying loyal to really reality under pressure. I mean, that's what all of us have to do on a daily basis. It's even more so when we're talking about college students, doctoral students, graduate students. You're under the pressure, but are you adhering to reality? Are you making sure you're taking the time? So curiosity without consciousness devolves into chaos. We see it every single day in our society. We are in chaos. Just look at some of the people protesting things, and the logic is not there. We don't study logic anymore. We don't force logic, philosophy into the classrooms. When we did, you didn't have the crime. You didn't have you had better levels of income, because people were actually being taught how to think. Yes, and I think that if we're failing to prepare students on these topics for the future, we are failing. And that's where, again, this is my personal passion. That's the reason I've written this. This is the reason that I do this, is try to, like, if I can start a conversation, and it is, I'm not the end all be all knowing. I'm not going to jump deep into, some of my books that I've got, that I I write about a lot of the mechanisms. I've tried to come up with micro protocols to help. But if we're not trying to teach one another and we're not open, this is why I invite co-authors, I invite individuals to have discussions of, again, I'm not saying everything is going to come easy, but we have to ensure at least all 5 of these dispositions. I said it's 4 here, right? But judgment, I think, in the end, shows greater critical thinking in the end, when we're able to make judgment or a conclusion on something. So when we look at the analytical cycle, and I'm sorry, when I put my slide together, it kind of got a little jumbled. This isn't an the intelligence cycle. I look at it as, we need to orient ourselves. This is that looking at a disciplined movement through the uncertainty. Look at things that it's not certain to have happened. Look at it through a lens of, it's uncertain, until you can ultimately put it together that here is, in the end, it certainly happened, right? We have to orient ourselves. We have to look at the argument. We have to look at the position, the purpose of even doing this? Then we got to frame it in such a way that we're looking at information. What information are we going to be really researching? What are we going to ask for clarification, evaluation, so on and so forth? Things that we've talked about earlier. That's part of that interrogation. In the end, are we looking at the evidence? And how are we looking at the evidence? That becomes the structure. Do we have assumptions? Do we have any kind of alternative analyses that we want to look at? Are there things that we need to now say, nope, that's no longer part of the argument? Can we end up returning to the reflection? We have to synthesize everything. And again, that's that conclusion. Did we have a strong conclusion? Do we include implications and recommendations? Because that allows us to then reflect and be able to go, you know what? After all of that, I've processed the information, I've looked at it. Maybe I'm a little bit more concerned. Maybe I'm a little bit more yeah, maybe now I'm a little bit more in line with what somebody else has said. And I agree with what they have stated. These are things that I want individuals to really look at. Now, you heard me talk about micro protocols that save judgment. I mean, they're small little habits, yes, but to me, they really help you preserve the craft of analysis. So when we look at the goal isn't perfect analysis. I don't think that we'll ever have perfect analysis. AI is not going to get us there. It most certainly can help. It can help identify gaps. It can help identify new thoughts, brainstorming. You can utilize it as a sounding board. You can actually ask it for contrarian viewpoints. You can even ask it to, what gaps am I missing here? What research should I be looking at? So you want to be able to pause. You want to be able to define and separate. These are things that we've talked about all in the end. But again, utilizing these as micro protocols as, say, somewhat of a checklist, these will help you daily, and not only what you do, but how you do it. And look at uncertainty. And when I say power, it's your own thought, but also know the cost of honesty, because morally, you and I want to be correct. We want to be honest. But how many people do we work with or for, or have we had in our lives in the past that they wouldn't look at this the same way? That if you were truly honest with them and you had the encouragement and or the courage and the power to say, you know what? If I tell you truly the way I feel, people are going to get hurt, their feelings, or even, physically, right? So uncertainty is the native climate of human judgment. Just think about that. We're always uncertain. This is the sky is falling. But we, as institutions, we often conceal uncertainty because, as, say, instructors, as senior individuals, we are supposed to be the ones that come out like we know it all, aren't we? We're always supposed to speak with this confidence. When we speak at conferences, you put together a presentation and you have the confidence to get up there, just like, say, I have the confidence to sit here and say, here's all this information, here's this knowledge, here's things I think about. But I also look at it from the standpoint of, there are some uncertainties. I'm uncertain, out of the 9 people in this room right now, how many am I preaching to the choir? And I'm uncertain that the information I'm going to give to you tonight goes beyond here. You can say to yourself, no, I'm definitely going to use this. I'm going to visit. I'm going to read his articles again, or he needs to follow me, which, hey, great, I'll subscribe. We often speak in terms of having polished assessments. Give me the information that a decision maker can have to make the ultimate judgment. But again, we deal only in uncertainties. It's very rare that we deal in certainties. And we always have to have this feeling of knowing information, don't we? So when we're in that position of power over our own thought processes, our own critical thinking, I think, and anybody wants to chime in, that when we look at our own psychology, yes, as I stated very early on, this is a big passion for me to go. I want to read, I want to research more about understanding my own failures to think critically. Failures. I have that humility, and my power wants more clarity. What is it that I don't know? And that's the reason I write on it. Um, again, I mean, you look back at, yes, 150 articles or something like that over the last year. Um, Basically, I look at things of, say, like the one of the most recent articles was about in-group orthodoxy. I was reading an article and then just happened, I mean, this is AI listening, right? That I just on my Instagram listened to a psychologist talk about in-group orthodoxy, and in the political sense, uh, of where we see protesters who wouldn't necessarily be protesting something if they truly understood what they were protesting about, or for who, or why, but they weren't looking at the overall, and well, so looking at that, I was like, wow, I just got done reading in one of my plethora of critical thinking books. I had actually stumbled across that like a couple of weeks ago. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is something that I really don't understand the complexities of it. So I did more reading about it. I did more research about it. And so I looked at it from a different standpoint. Now, as practitioners, whether we're academics or whether we're professionals, we're looking at things that bureaucracy wants speed. I look at that as false precision, right? Where can AI help us? Yes, I think that it can lessen the speed, um, because then we can think more about the information that AI can help us sift through. Well, the audiences want some kind of certainty, right? The judgment that we come out with, you know, we're 95% certain this is going to happen. Well, that's why we really need to look at things kind of slowing down, utilizing the tools, techniques that we have, because environments really do shape our outcomes. Yes, we want to look at that predictable product, but is it a product that we can stand behind? Bad thinking is often the predictable product of a bad ecology, right? Um, do we want our best and brightest? Yes. But who can say they are the best and brightest? Just because, again, they have a PhD at the back of their name, like myself, doesn't necessarily make me a better thinker. I'm definitely not a bad thinker. I know I can always improve, and I will always strive to. So to me, that being able to do more, because I've reflected, I've gone through these. So, the systems, and I've written about this as well. When systems reward shortcuts, we see it all the time in everything corporate America and so on and so forth. You see all of this. But then when it really wants to protect integrity, the incentives they want are honesty. They want to see the dissent. They want to see the reflection. Is it really disciplined inquiry? Is it caveated? Right? When we say, well, let me caveat that with, well, there could be information. Thank you very much. There could be information that could change the outcome of this. Do we look at things from an adversarial point of view, that testing outcome, right? Learning, accuracy, ethical resilience. Can we come back from something? See, good thinking is not merely, and I know I'm reading this, is not really merely an individual gift. It is something that we have to condition ourselves, right? And it can be created, it can be destroyed, and who can destroy it? It runs through the gamut, right? So these are things I want to enlighten you on and have you think about. So the in group, and you've heard me talk about it. This is why I was like, oh, learning about it and really going, okay, is anybody else interested in this? That how belonging can quietly erode critical thinking. We've seen this in our higher learning education institutions. We've seen this in our K through 12s. We've seen this at just society at large. Belonging. People feel so detached because of social media. You can go back, I can go back to, well, when cell phones started to get fancier and fancier, well, we no longer needed to be tied to a landline that the cord was 10 feet long. So you could, no longer had to be in mom's kitchen. Yes, I'm a product of the 70s. So belonging was the group of bikes that ended up on somebody's front lawn. But now I found like-minded people on the internet and I want to belong to something, but I don't leave my room. But then once you belong to this group, now you're pressured that, are you with the cause? Are you down? Like, you can't dissent against anything within this group. And then there's that self-censorship. Oh, I have to, I can't even. So you're really shedding your own perspectives, your own lived experiences, right? Your own ideals. Well, then you have that selective scrutiny. That's where you start to look at only information that supports your loyalty, your self-centered, your self-censorship, right? Then this consensus that you end up with is false. And so what is that cost of dissent? Well, you're no longer part of that group. And that's why I have the arrow pointing to nothingness. You are no longer part of that group. So once belonging becomes tied to belief, criticism is no longer received as an inquiry. It is experienced as disloyalty. And we see time and again political ideologies like socialism and communism. That's exactly what they are. That's the tenets of their goal. So when we look at one framework, many domains, I want you to look at why the same discipline travels across very different environments. We look at education and justice and intelligence and AI, but how are we using it? Earlier, we talked about resisting politicalization and premature closure of an idea because it doesn't fit your narrative. We've seen abuses in the US intelligence community that have done this, and it has transcended political ideology. Again, in safeguarding analytical integrity, I call out each and every time for the last 50 or 60 years that this has happened. And this is where intelligence should no longer be politicized. And again, I use that as both the political ideology of the left versus right, but I also look at it as the politicalization within an office, within a department, that the outcome and conclusion was not what a chief of police thought it would be. And therefore, if they went to the mayor with this or the city council with this, that's not going to look good. So I need you to change this. We need to lessen the blow. That's premature closure as well. When we start looking at treating uncertainty um, honestly, when lives are at stake, that's when I think we start to really look at the justice. It's that real honesty. Is somebody truly guilty or are they truly innocent? When we look at education, are we truly teaching inquiry rather than compliant performance? We see it all the time. It is, I think, especially the upper levels, ninth, 10th, or even eighth grade and above, especially today, we need to, in the days of AI, we need to be implementing and really encouraging and pushing inquiry, asking the questions, go beyond, read the textbook, write me, here's a test, take the quiz, you pass or fail. That's really just rote memorization. It's not really getting into the actual discussions. Where are the discussions? We very rarely have that, even at the higher education levels. The only real inquiry that I can say we see is in the graduate and the doctoral levels, because we're looking at discussions that are, yes, researched, they're penned by the student. The students can actually inquiry. Now, I think we also have to encourage students to get out of the, yes, I agree with you. Well, that's that compliance performance. It's been so ingrained. So how do we keep the human as an active epistemic agent? Why do we want them to do more inquiry? I don't believe that AI is going to take the place of human thought, even though people want to say that. I'm not going to do that. I look at AI as a game changer, as a force multiplier to what I can do and what I can do for myself. Right? I can actually have it create I can do an agentic AI to look at when I should have my thermostats on and off, when my lights should go on and off, to help me save power, to help me save water. Okay, that's great. But what about, oh, I would need to make it that, can it pay my bills to ensure all my bills are paid? Can it respond to emails at a certain rate that I don't have to respond to mass emails every single day, that I can get back 2, 3, 4 hours of my own time? Can it write reports? Not that you are taking out of the loop of hitting send, but can it put the gist of everything you need to know and that you can ask new questions to be able to deliver the judgment that you need to? I think it can, if we're doing it right. And again, that takes critical thinking from you and I. And we're almost finished. I know I've gone about 25 minutes over, but this is where I really look at the climax of tonight is the AI and the synthetic confusion. I know a lot of people are very confused. They are frustrated, or they're even flat out scared of AI, of using generative tools, because institutions have said, we don't want you using it because we're worried that you're going to ask it to write your paper for us or write the report for us. But what it can do, and what it often does, is it summarizes stuff a lot quicker, and it actually can provide us some sound authoritative information. Don't get me wrong, information. This is where you and I have to come in, is that while it might be fluent, you still need to be the one checking that summary. Does it sound? Can you ask it to point, and you can. Where does every single sentence that you are writing, I want it cited, where you got that information from. Once you start to learn how to do that, now you can actually start trusting that fluency and the accuracy. AI does not hallucinate. 99% of the time. What was 2 years ago or even a year ago that it would hallucinate and make up information if it didn't know it or couldn't find it. It has ingested so much information by people using it, and it has been able to crawl. Um, it's made itself smarter. So we know that they can influence, flatten nuance, but that's where you, the human, need to be able to say, I need to amplify this information. Yes, it hides sources of weakness and it accelerates the spread of false confidence. But at the same time, you as a human, you can turn that around and be able to go, I've done my research. I've looked at it. I've thought about what it's done. I've done extra research to find, because this is called vibing. Um, and it's by using like ChatGPT and Gemini and Copilot, the differences between Anthropic and OpenAI. By utilizing the different tools that are out there, will lessen that false confidence that AI has. It used to tell us a lot. I'm sorry, I don't know all that information. It's very limited. Now it gives you information and never talks about false confidence. It just gives you generalizations. Well, you, the human, are the one that still has to synthesize and analyze information. Used well, they can assist legwork. Used poorly, they become the accelerant for error, bad judgment, or even just flat out bad writing, bad research. You, as the human, you're not a passive review. You need to really look at things actively. I say active interrogation. You want to read through. I do. I look at tons of the stuff that and again, I run my agents on different topics that I want to write about. And I say, I need more information on in-group orthodoxy. What has been written to show examples in the last 2 years? I want any kind of research, authoritative writings, no news, no media, no influencers, nothing from YouTube. You got to kind of tell it what you want. I'm interrogating it. I'm letting it know what I really expect from it, and it does learn from that. Um, and that's what I look at as leadership and training ourselves and others. That if you're serious, you are now the one that's going to be able to protect. You're going to be able to build, and you're going to be able to train others for that pressure. See, we used to believe that PowerPoints, like, oh, give me the PowerPoint and I'll look it over. Well, now that no longer is it. Now we're looking for, I want real scenarios. I want to be able to critique things. I want that repetition that shows every single time the accuracy is on. So we just don't need leaders who are influencers. We need leaders who really are starting to understand that they have a role and accountability and guardianship of the conditions of critical thinking. If we're not telling individuals, each other, I need you to think more critically about this issue. Can you talk to me about it? This is where I look at the personal craft. We're living it. Okay. I'm just not merely saying it's a technique. That's why I write about it. That's why I try to come up with innovative ways to have like micro protocols or checklists, or what are 3 lessons that I need to learn today. These are from my own personal thought processes. That's the reason I cite works that I go and find, because I've read through them and I've placed them in there. Yes, I've utilized AI to help me, and I dictate to it a lot. I will talk to it and tell it, I need to write about X, Y, and Z. I mean, I've got 5 screens right in front of me, because I'm looking all over the place. That it allows me to, and it doesn't distract me, but I can look at 2 different research products and say, I need you to go do more research, because this research paper alludes to these two authors and this year. Can you go find me that research paper? So I'm not in a hurried state. So I'm not overlooking things. I'm dictating to it. And then I ask it to clean it up, put it into a format that is professional. But I'll also tell you, having the intellectual humility, the intellectual honesty, ask what you are afraid to know. I'm afraid to know what I'm going to say is wrong. Should I go research that more? Get into the discipline of reading. I have a book in my car. Matter of fact, I think I have like 3 books in my car, because then if I have to go sit someplace or wait, you know, I can reach for a book rather than doom scroll. I reconsider things before reacting. How many of us get to this point where we've even met people who get so stressed out they react? See, even the Stoics tell you you have the choice to react. So you have the ability to have that reflective pause. You have the emotional temperance to refine. Don't impersonate just because you think you want to come off smart. We've all met our nemesis. We have competitors, and we feel like, and I've met plenty of people, I used to be one of them, very highly competitive in analytical know-how, that I would, get into a group with other analysts and have to prove that I was right, when I could have just said, you know what, go ahead, let's see what you got. But no, I really had to impersonate something just to end up with, well, oh, that gotcha moment. You have to have that courage to revise, change your mind when that evidence, that even though it sticks out, you're going, I don't know if that evidence is exactly what I need, but it might just be enough. So critical thinking is not merely a procedure. Think about that. It's not, yes, you should be doing it. You should cognitively, consciously be thinking about your thinking and what am I doing to improve it? What little thing consciously can I move toward that says, I typed out this whole paragraph. I think it sounds great, but did you go back and proofread it? Did you go back and really scrutinize every nuanced word? Why did I write that word? Why did I make it sound like I truly believe X, Y, and Z? You never know. To me, it is a moral commitment to your own reality, right? So we've come kind of to the end. Yes, I have my, again, if you are just joining us from outside, you've never joined Substack, again, there are wonderful colleagues on Substack. You can run the gamut. I think that Substack, it's only been around a year, about 2 years, and it has exploded. It is a way that we, as professionals, practitioners, as scholars, as academics, we don't have to wait for a journal. We can get out our writings that maybe aren't significant enough to go into a journal. Okay. So like I've written some books along the way. Some of these I've worked on for 10, 15 years. And only in the last year to 2 years that I've really been able to, because of being retired from federal service, I've been able to focus on and put together. I have just published 100 Stoic lessons for overcoming life's challenges. I love Stoicism, but I also love cynicism. The cynics, I think, are very highly underrated. So I also have recent essays, again, things that you can take a look at. Some of them are under the paid subscription. So, of course, I have to do the shameless plugging of that as well. So again, we're going to look at, what does critical thinking demand of us when certainty is rewarded, speed is expected, and belonging is seductive? Um, these are some of the questions I want to leave you with. And if you want, I'll stay on here for a little bit. If anybody wants to discuss anything further, that what claim or assumption from tonight do you feel most important to test further? Again, these are reflective, but if you want a little bit more information, we can talk through it. Where do you see the illusion of thinking most clearly in your own field? Um, Not just say criminal justice or intelligence studies, but you could be in emergency management, you could be in nursing, education, engineering. Um, so, what small discipline could you start practicing tomorrow? Something that maybe we have talked about, something that I may have sparked an interest or didn't, that you were already thinking about, but just tonight kind of inspired you. Anyone? Like I said, I monitor the chat. I'll give you maybe about 10 seconds to write something. If I don't see anything, I'll go ahead and sign off. I do really appreciate the time. I know I went 35 minutes longer than I really thought I would. But again, I do appreciate every one of you uh, for being here, for supporting me. If you too are on Substacks or LinkedIn, I would love to connect and support you as well in any and all of your endeavors. So please do let me know. With that, I am back on camera. So again, thank you so much. I'm Dr. Charles Russo, and you have a wonderful night. You take care.